Having now lived in both cities, London and New York, that what was going on in New York in 74, 75 was predating what was going on in London. And I do have to say, and I remember this, I started out very young in the music world. I had older friends who took me to not so much to gigs, but onto the football terraces. And in 1976, they were instantly smitten by the Ramones. These older friends I had, so I was like 12, they were 15, 16. They were smitten by the Ramones. We did not get a record out by the Sex Pistols or the Damned until December 1976. So, and at that point, when I started writing about this, the Ramones had already been gigging a couple of years. It was a more arty, you could argue that in ways it was a more artsy movement in New York. To be honest, the Sex Pistols started out very artsy and then it quickly became a sensationalist thing. I think there was an incredible amount of back and forth, just like there was with the glam movement, which I write about here, the way Bowie back and forth and the Warhol theatre crowd. But having lived in both places, I now have to, I would say that what was going on in CBGB's was much more formulated in 1975, early 76 than anything that was going on in England.
There's also a different there's a class perspective to look at it. I think that the British sort of conscious class identification with punk was not what was the foundation here, because we have no classes in the United States. But not only the Ramones, but David Johansen's band,
New York Dolls.
The New York Dolls. I mean, you had the glam movement, which, by the way, you want to talk about homophobia, the glam movement and the Steven Tylers of the world were not homophobic. It's only when the hair bands, the Poisons, and those people came into play that the real homophobia came into play. So you had this sort of glam reality, and David Johansen, who had been a busboy at Max's Kansas City, when all those straight boys wearing all that glam clothes and female underwear and lipstick and being very much the men of a different century, being very glamorous about themselves, that was very, very hard for the young working class kid who was attracted to punk and British to understand. But Malcolm McLaren got it, because Malcolm McLaren came here because he wanted to take the Dolls back to England, and they were going to be the Sex Pistols, and it didn't happen. He just stole Richard Hell's T-shirt idea. I mean, because we don't even talk about the fashion in it, what happens with fashion also here. But the punk movement in England is very, in my mind, is very different from what happened here in the United States. We had the Ramones, who were from Queens. They were the new Max's Kansas City, the Max's Kansas City nobody went to anymore because it was all black leather jackets and bridge and tunnel kids, except for Danny Fields and Peter Crowley, who of course loved those kinds of boys. And so so that argument is really not a fair one. They come from very different places, and it's only when they're trying to turf it out and say we were first. One of the things I've learned about music and popular culture is a sinkhole to say, I did it first, because someone else, someplace else, is probably in some garage someplace doing the same thing, thinking that she is reinventing the whole soundscape.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's something I really try and cover in the book, that every scene that you thought you knew started earlier than you thought you knew it, and even when it started that much earlier, it's following on a twist from the previous movement, and that's the kind of the arc of the discussion here, that one thing will lead into the birth of something else, and on it goes. Everything's always recreating itself and in a kind of constant state of flux.
The whole discussion would be not just about punk, but about race. And who was allowed to be a punk musician, who was allowed to be a rock musician, who was allowed to be a folk musician. And these are very serious questions, and they reflect the dominant cultures that the children came from in both instances.
Which is why, and I know we have to wrap it up, that's why I'm glad to be able to get the chance to write about disco and hip-hop and punk in the same book, following on from one to the other, because people will write books about each of those musics and put them there and there and there, and there was a lot of interaction between all of those musics, and I think that needs to be recognized. Ario, I saw you kind of looking at me there. I know that we could go on.
Sorry, I know that this is great, and you could probably go on for hours, and it would be wonderful, but unfortunately we have to wrap up. I'd like to thank you both so much for coming. Yay.
Do read the book, though. I mean, I don't normally say that because I'm usually critical of whatever's written, but I think that Tony's done a really remarkable job. It isn't everything. If there's something left out, then go home and write your own book about it. It'll be very good to do. But he's really sent a template down that no one else that I've seen that you can understand has done.
Thank you, Jim.
And copies are available here, which you can pick up and have personalized, or in the back there's also more copies. Please check out our events at strandbooks.com, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim.